Hello and welcome to the 105. I'm Cooper Petagna. That's 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins, and we got a loaded show for you today on Rankings Day. Here is what's on tap this Wednesday, revealing the updated 2026 rankings. We also introduce a brand new five-star, as he is named. Guys that fire us up, we'll get into that with Andrew Ivins, and also flip watch intel with Tom Loy. We'll hit that a little bit later in the show, but let's not keep you waiting. Let's go 1 through 32 and take a look at the new top 32 prospects in 2026. This group highlighted by tight end Ian Premer out of Kansas. It seems like another tight end from Kansas breaking into that rare status. The next, as we flip, we look at offensive tackle Kenai Pepe, another guy that we really like here out of Florida in IMG. Brandon Arrington, another guy really surging up the board as well. Kenai Pepe there at number 19, as I mentioned earlier. Keyshawn Henderson committed to Houston. Chris Henry Jr. committed to Ohio State. And now for our top 10. And where to start this conversation, you see the newcomer among the top 5. That is wide receiver Tristan Keys from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And with that, we will welcome in Andrew Ivins, our Director of Scouting. Drew, a new number 1 receiver and a guy that's cracking that top 5 conversation. Tell us why so much love for Tristan Keys in this process.
You turn on the junior tape, and there's a lot to like about Tristan Keys. And this is someone that first caught our eye back in the offseason, the summer months. We saw him at one of those overtime OT7 events in Orlando, and then he really kind of made for a name for himself at the championship in Tampa in early June. I mean, that was an event loaded with upperclassmen. It was like, all right, who's this kid Tristan Keys catching passes from Deuce Knight, right? He was with the Coastline teams, and then he's only gotten better here as a junior for Hattiesburg. Undefeated right now. They went 10-0, and I just love the combination of the size, the elite ball skills, superior athleticism. See him in these contested catch situations, the body control, the adjustments. I think he's a dynamic route runner. I like what he can do after the catch. You know, is he a true burner? Probably not. But this is a kid that was a state qualifier in 3 track and field events. He can punch it on the hardwood, put back dunks. You saw that from his sophomore season on the hardwood. I think he has everything to bake into a wide receiver 1 for a college football playoff contender. And, you know, as we put together this update and we're looking guys at the top of the board, to me, Tristan Keys is the most complete wide receiver. Now, there's some other guys we like out there. Sedarian Morgan, he's at number 10 overall. Ohio State commit Chris Henry, you just mentioned, Calvin Russell. We like all those guys, but to me, Tristan Keys, his game translates to Saturdays, and it's going to translate hopefully to Sundays at some point down the line. And the other thing, Cooper, hey, you know, Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, you go back and you kind of, all right, revisionist history. What did they show throughout the evaluation process when they were in high school? I mean, these are guys that got into the end zone. Tristan Keys doing just that as a junior, and the entire SEC wants him.
Yeah, you brought it up. I mean, we've been spoiled with dynamic, generational type of receivers, especially from that class just a year ago. Jeremiah Smith, you talk about Ryan Williams, Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo, some names that are emerging as freshmen. Tristan Keys kind of fits that mold as a guy that could go wire to wire. Obviously, getting that 5th star shows you what we think about him. Drew, let's take a look at the top 10 quarterback rankings here in 2026, and I want to dive right into this. And the guy at the top of the board, Faison Brandon. I remember last time you and I were talking about Faison Brandon in the move to put him atop of the board there, not only as the number 1 signal caller in the country, but the number 1 player in the country. At that time, it seemed to be a little bit of a calculated shot. Going back to the film midway through the junior year, it doesn't seem like that so much anymore.
Yeah, and really the entire quarterback picture, I think, has come into focus, at least the top half of the board. Faison Brandon, 10-0. He's got Grimsley High School, top seed in North Carolina's 4A playoffs in the West Division. He's got the best completion percentage in the top 247. He's got the most yards per attempt in the top 247, 20 touchdowns, just 1 INT. I think he's throwing up with a lot more anticipation here in his second year as a starter. Tennessee's got a good one committed, and that has been the case. No reason to kind of move him off where he is. I think he's excellent for an up-tempo offense. You know, he can run the RPOs. He can beat defenses with his legs. And I also think he looks much more calm and collected in the pocket, limited panic. And he really just doesn't put the football in harm's way. Watched 2 of his games, I think over 30 passes. I had marked one of them down as a turnover-worthy throw. So it's all starting to click for Faison Brandon. And we'll see. I mean, he could, too, also go wire to wire. Unfortunately, we're not going to get him in one of these all-star games here. The juniors are playing this year. North Carolina, those guys can't do it. But a lot to like with him. And then Coop, the guys that are knocking on the door right behind him, Ryder Lyons and Jared Curtis, they're sitting 6 and 7 in the rankings. We talked about potentially making them 5-star prospects. I want to get one more kind of exposure point. Obviously, we're going to have a ton of camps here in the spring months. Who knows, maybe one of these guys will show up to Navy's All-American Bowl, Jared Curtis, in the conversation to potentially take one of those spots. But you look at them, both those guys off to 8-1 starts, over 20 touchdown passes, just 3 INTs. Ryder Lyons, to me, man, he kind of embraces chaos. He is a gunslinger. He's energetic. You're looking for a player comp with Ryder Lyons. Kind of reminds me like a little bit of Drake May. Now, he's not as big as Drake May, but both those guys have basketball backgrounds, completing 71.4% of his passes. The other thing, 398 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns. Jared Curtis, you want to talk about him, playing a lower level of competition right in your backyard at Nashville Christian, but he's completing 70% of his passes, 29 touchdowns, 3 INTs. He's got 444 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns. That's the most in the top 247. I think he's got an elite deep ball, Cooper. The other thing, such a confident mover in the pocket. Kind of reminds me of Dylan Raiola, right? What we saw from him late in his prep career, and that's translated over to his time at Nebraska. I know he's kind of going through some growing pains now, but if you look at Raiola in the pocket, just kind of how he moves around, how he feels out pressure, extends plays, keeps his eyes downfield, I think there's a lot of similarities there between him and Jared Curtis.
Yeah, both those guys incredibly worthy. You got to see Jared Curtis this year live and in person, very physically impressive as well. Drew, there are a couple guys outside of the top 10 rankings, inside the top 10 of the quarterback rankings, and one of those guys, Keyshawn Henderson, who we have listed as an athlete because there are a lot of programs out there recruiting him at receiver, recruiting him at DB. That's a guy that comes to mind. Dia Bell, the son of Raja Bell, former NBA standout at American Heritage, has played well, committed to Texas. Drew, you can kind of go down the list with a handful of names. Landon Duckworth there in Alabama, Oscar Rios out west. What do you think of kind of that crew that has a chance to potentially maybe work their way up into that top-tier conversation?
Well, Faison Brandon, right, Ryder Lyons, Jared Curtis, what I just mentioned, they've all almost ran for over 500 yards as a junior, right? You want to see that pocket mobility, them being able to get out of sacks. And then that next list you just brought up, they're also all dynamic athletes. Keyshawn Henderson is the one where I'm kind of like, okay, I want to see what's going to happen with this guy. Cooper, we saw him at the Future 50, right? He's played wide receiver. He's played safety. He makes a ton of plays there, but he, as a junior, is his team's starting quarterback. He's an exceptional athlete for the position. And yeah, he isn't the most polished passer, but the more you watch of him, he will drop some absolute dimes, back shoulder fades, right where the football needs to be. I'm really buying into the idea of him being a quarterback on Saturdays. Houston, Willie Fritz, they're going to let him play quarterback. I think some other teams, as soon as they kind of dig into the junior tape, they're going to want to get involved. And he could have a Keelan Russell type of rise in terms of a kid. All right, he's committed to a second-tier program there in the state of Texas. Next thing you know, you look up and all of the countries after him. So Keyshawn Henderson, to me, he's one where I'm excited. And same thing with Dia Bell, who's committed to Texas. He's at American Heritage. Cooper, behind the scenes, we said, all right, American Heritage is playing one of the most difficult schedules in America. Dia Bell has them off to a 9-2 start, right? They have a good seed in Florida's playoffs. To me, he's just got a natural feel for the position. Struggled early on in the season, kind of that opener against Milton, which was on ESPN. And since then, I think he's gotten better and better every single game. Throws with touch, can push it down the field. He's also finding ways to move inside and outside the pocket. So, Steve Sarkisian, Texas, I feel like every year we talk about this quarterback they got. Dia Bell, certainly another one in the pipeline, in the chamber there for the Longhorns.
Yeah, one of the most natural passers in the class, and you talked about it. I mean, an embarrassment of riches there in Austin with what they have in the pipeline. Arch Manning, Trey Owens, another guy that we really liked as well. Add in Dia Bell. Pretty complete picture there for the next couple years for Steve Sarkisian. Drew, let's talk about the strength of this class and what you think is this edge group, highlighted by a guy that we kind of bet on early and the number 2 player in the country, Zion Ely.
Yeah, man, he's juiced up. Transfers in for St. Francis Baltimore Academy for his junior season. So he's leveling up in competition. We're kind of wondering, all right, what's this going to look like? You'll see him here, man. He's going to flush out Keelan Russell. That Duncanville game, he was in Keelan's face the entire night. And what really stands out to me about kind of the evaluation on Zion Ely, yeah, he tests off the chart. His broad jump from the Under Armour camp circuit is one of the freakiest things I've seen since I've been in this position. But Cooper, they went down to Clearwater Central Catholic a few weeks ago, which is a throwback wing T type of offense with some veer concepts. And Zion Ely, who we describe as a pass rusher, right? This is a guy that can get after the quarterback. I thought he looked really good against the run for someone that's going to eventually need to put on size, right? He held his ground, wasn't afraid to get physical. Arrow continues to point up for him. Everyone in the country wants Zion Ely. Extremely easy to see why. And I think, he's kind of the cream of the crop. Maybe any other cycle, if we didn't have a quarterback like Faison Brandon up there, Zion Ely would be our number one player. But right now, it goes to the quarterback. But don't sleep on Zion Ely.
All right, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you and I talk enough that I kind of know where your head's at. This next guy could be your favorite player in the entire class. Tell me a little bit about Xavier Griffin, the number 8 player in the country.
Yeah, and this is a guy that was also in the 5-star conversation. He's at Gainesville High School there in Georgia. I think he is a clone of Jahad Campbell, who's at Alabama. Kind of the same conversation, all right? Is he an off-ball linebacker, on-ball linebacker, edge rusher? I don't think it really matters because this dude just makes plays. And I actually went back and I looked, all right, Jahad Campbell, what he measured, his testing numbers from him in high school, near identical to Xavier Griffin. And it's the same thing. They kind of position him all over that front seven. His ability to flow forward and then just, close gaps, make plays. It is all there. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Xavier Griffin, committed to USC. Cooper, we always mention the Trojans, Lincoln Riley. They have to find these type of dudes on defense. He is the real deal. I think he's someone we're going to be talking about for the next, 13, 14 months. Huge fan. He's expected to play in the Navy All-American Bowl here in January. And I think that's going to be an awesome exposure point, just getting him around some of these older prospects, because Xavier Griffin, Cooper, he is still just 16 years old. I think the sky's the limit.
Rare to see that type of similarity in a player. And Jahad Campbell, Drew, probably one of the freakier prospects that we've had in quite some time. Alabama, they've played him off ball. They've experimented playing off the edge, really kind of coming into his own under Caden Womack this year. Drew, a trio of other edge rushers you can look at in this conversation. Rodney Dunham, a guy that we took a shot on early. We've been super pleased with him, how he's played so far as a junior. Then a couple other guys, Trenton Henderson and Tristan Givens as well.
Yeah, I mean, Rodney Dunham, what's crazy is he's also a talented baseball prospect as a pitcher. He, too, young for the grade. I think with him, it's the combination of his ability to bend, right, and then his size. He has put on some good weight here. He's only going to be more of a monster. He has a knack for just getting his hands up in affecting passing lanes. I mean, you turn on the tape, he's consistently swatting things. He had multiple interceptions as a sophomore. He is rounding into form. You love to see that. Trenton Henderson, Cooper, this is the one that really fired me up there. Tucked at Pensacola Catholic in Florida's Panhandle. Kid that was playing primarily, off-ball linebacker and dropping back into coverage as a sophomore. They've given him the green light to just hound quarterbacks here as a junior. 6'4", 225 pounds. He's eventually going to get up to 245, but the way he moves, the way he redirects, retraces, very, very unique. I think he's a guy that everyone's going to be after. I think he can fit into an even front, an odd front, big on Trenton Henderson. And then this Tristan Givens kid out of Carver High School, he was one where, working late into the night, you're watching kids back to back to back, and it's like, all right, this is kind of getting boring. He woke me up, right? I didn't need a cup of coffee at 11 p.m. He's a converted wide receiver to pass rusher, had really no idea what he was doing last fall when he made that position switch midseason. Here as a junior, man, he has started to figure it out. He can cross offensive tackles. He can bend around them, and he's also getting it done on the offensive side of the ball as well. They got him playing some wide receiver, making acrobatic catches. So he's one in the heart of SEC country. I think a lot of schools are going to move on as we get into January, February, March, right? We're going to close the page on 2025. 2026s are going to be in the forefront, and I think there's a nice group of pass rushers that are going to have a chance to make an impact as early as 2026.
All right, you talked about the work that you've been doing in such a subtle way, but you've been grinding on this 2026 class specifically. So here's a layup of a question. We get to talk about guys that really kind of fire you up, and a couple, Drew, that have entered the top 32. You talk about guys like Brandon Arrington and Ian Premer, both these guys now situated in the top 32. Let's start with Arrington. What do you like so much about him?
Well, he's someone we've been conservative with. Greg Biggins out in the West Coast does an excellent job for us on the scouting team. You turn on what Brandon Arrington did as a sophomore, it was like, okay, we know he's a freak athlete, but this looks like a sprinter that's trying to play football. Well, I think Brandon Arrington now, he's a football player that just happens to have potentially world-class speed. We're talking about the Gatorade California Track and Field Player of the Year for 2023-2024. He won CIF titles in the 100 and 200-meter dashes. Now, I think the big kind of question with him, is he a wide receiver? Is he a corner? You've heard his camps split on what they want to do. I think you got to try this length on the defensive side of the ball, out on the perimeter. For everything I've heard, green numbers, super long arms. He's got that similar height-speed combo to one of my favorite players to watch on Sundays, and that would be Seattle Seahawks corner Tyreek Woolen. Texas A&M sunk their teeth in here. Everyone's coming after Brandon Arrington. Very, very easy to see why. Cooper, we have all these, big frame corners sitting in 5-star status in 2025. Your DJ Pickett's, your Devin Sanchez's, your Dijon Lee. Well, guess what? Brandon Arrington's faster than all of them.
Yeah, you talk about a guy that wakes you up a little bit when you pop on the tape, the things that he can do on both sides of the football. Brandon Arrington, one of those guys, regardless, we're going to be talking about for quite some time. Drew, a couple other guys in day two, Jermaine Bishop, Richard Anderson from Edna Carr right there in New Orleans. And Bishop, one of those guys, you can read your article at 24/7 Sports breaking down the 2026 and all the headliners that came with the update today. But how about this? What do we call him? The Texas Travis Hunter? That's pretty high praise there, right?
Yeah, and Gabe Brooks on our scouting team, he brought this up to me. I have to credit it to someone. I don't know who's calling him the Travis Hunter of Texas high school football, but man, it kind of fits. In 33 career varsity games, over 2,500 yards receiving, 43 total touchdowns, 13 interceptions on defense. This is a kid that actually caught passes from DJ Lagway as a sophomore there for the Willis Wildcats. I could like him on offense. I could like him on defense, Cooper. Kind of reminds me of that Terry Bussey conversation. I think me and you will be split. I mean, he is slight of frame, but he's got that wiry tendon strength, the grade A acceleration, and he can change speeds. He's just a playmaker. I think he's one of the top guys in the Lone Star State, now up to number 35 for us. Interested to see, okay, what happens to his recruitment given where he's ranked now.
All right, guys, just a reminder, stay locked to 247sports.com for all of Andrew's content like you can find on the 2026 update. Also, wall-to-wall team coverage, recruiting rankings, and transfer portal updates as well, which will come in handy in the next couple weeks as the transfer portal is right around the corner in the first week of December. And with that, we're going to bring in national recruiting analyst Tom Loy as we have some breaking news as 5-star receiver Caleb Cunningham has flipped his commitment from the Crimson Tide to the home school there in Ole Miss. Tom, this was a big one. Ole Miss have been working on this, obviously a big priority for them to continue to reload at the receiver position. What can you tell us about Cunningham's flip?
Yeah, we had heard it was basically a done deal as of last weekend, and they moved the needle when he got back on campus, and obviously big win over Georgia. Things are moving in the right direction for Ole Miss, but George McDonald, Lane Kiffin, those guys, receivers coach, head coach, going to get a lot of love. But really, the guy to know here is Kelvin Bolden. He's the coordinator of recruiting strategy, and this guy owns the SIP. It's just that simple. He led the way for Caleb Cunningham and was recruiting him since day one. And you could see him on Twitter, the subtweets, things like that, where he was making it clear that they were going to make a big splash. Now, Caleb Cunningham was the guy. Obviously, this is a huge loss for Alabama. This is one of the top players in the entire country. But now you kind of wait to see where they go from here. You know they're pushing for Deuce Knight. They're trying to get him to flip from Auburn, who's previously flipped from Notre Dame and then landed on the Plains. But, my sources maintain that kid is going to end up sticking with the Tigers. But you can't rule out Lane Kiffin. You can't rule out Ole Miss. And you surely can't rule out Kelvin Bolden when it comes to one of the top players in Mississippi.
Andrew, one of the more intriguing pass catchers in the entire country. I think you and I, the rest of the staff, really kind of trying to get a pulse on Caleb Cunningham, really where he fits in the big picture of things. But your initial thoughts on him flipping his commitment to Ole Miss?
I think this is a big one because I think Caleb Cunningham is going to play for Ole Miss in 2025, right? Now, is it going to be Jeremiah Smith level? Is it going to be Ryan Williams level? I'm not sure yet. Again, we keep saying it. Hey, let's get to the postseason All-Star games. Let's see him move him around in that setting. But for Ole Miss, I love the idea of him in that offense, right? You know, Trey Harris is gone. They're going to lose a lot. They're losing a ton of production. I think he's a guy that can step in excellent after the catch, right? You can throw him the swing passes. You can get it to him, drags over the middle. He's going to break tackles. He's going to get down the field. He is going to provide chunk plays. So this is huge. And really, like Coop, when we start piecing together, right, all right, who's going to make an impact type of content? I think you can just write Caleb Cunningham, Ole Miss, and Sharpie when we look towards the next season.
All right, Tom, it feels like this is really kind of the tip of the spear for things to come over the next 20-plus days or so before National Signing Day. And let's talk about the number one player in the country, Bryce Underwood. There's been a lot of smoke there with hometown Michigan. He's just coming off a visit from LSU, who he's been committed to for quite some time. What can you tell us with that recruitment?
This one's been pretty wild over the last couple of weeks because if you talk to people around the Michigan program, there's a lot of optimism that he's going to eventually land in Ann Arbor. However, after this past weekend's trip to LSU, some of that optimism is kind of dwindled down and is more, I would call it hope at this point. When you talk to people around the LSU program, they feel great. They fully expect him. He's maintained his commitment that he made back on January 6, 2024, and he's been locked in ever since. So very active recruiter behind the scenes, fired up to get there. This is an opportunity for him to step into LSU and honestly Michigan as well and be the guy and the starter from day one. So it's a great opportunity for him. LSU feels great. Michigan's hopeful. We'll see what happens. But my best guess, I think that would kind of align with our national analyst, Alan True. I think we both would probably lean towards LSU keeping him in the class right now.
Drew, any take here one way or the other? I mean, if you've been watching Bryce Underwood, I think last time we had the update, we said, all right, he's kind of put this thing away in terms of the conversation for the number one player in the country. In your mind, is there a place that makes more sense than the other?
Well, I think they both need him. Cooper, you brought this up to me in a private conversation, right? What can Bryce Underwood do? What have we said he's kind of evolved here and shown as a senior? It's his ability to run the football, right, and extend plays and get outside the pocket. Yeah, we know he can pass it. Yeah, we know he's a really talented athlete. But I think him showing as a second-level runner here as a senior is so notable. And for LSU, right, you got Garrett Nussmeier back there behind two of these potential first-round picks at offensive tackle, and he still isn't able to really create when things break down, which I think hampers the offense. On the flip side, Michigan, I mean, they need all the help they can get. My question for Tom is, all right, if Michigan doesn't get Bryce Underwood, what is the next plan for them? What is plan B? Because let's not forget, they parted ways essentially with Carter Smith, the former Gatorade Player of the Year down in the Sunshine State, who is someone that I compare to Max Duggan, right? I think he can win on Saturdays. Yeah, he's a three-star prospect. He might not be inside the top 247. He might not be the sharpest of passers, but this is a guy to me fit Michigan's building, a guy that was recruiting for that class. So, if they come up empty-handed with Bryce, what other direction are they going to go? Because, hey, we're less than 4 weeks out till signing day.
I don't have a name for you at this point. What I do know is that they really, really like their class of 2026 quarterback commit Brady Hart in your backyard there in the Sunshine State. And then I think about what Sharon Moore said and talked about how they're going to be fine with kind of that smirk on his face. So clearly he's got something up his sleeve. At this point, again, I don't necessarily have a name in 2025 right now of who they would pivot to. Not even sure that they would pivot to anybody this late in the process. So it's going to be a fun couple of weeks for Michigan fans, I'm sure. But I still can't stop thinking about that little smirk he had. I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah, and you got to remember, top 247 quarterback Jaden Davis, who redshirted this year. Drew, I think the other thing, as you and I have talked about, transfer portal available to them as well. We don't know which names are going to be in there, but in the next couple of weeks, I think there will be more of a market, especially for Michigan, if they want to go that route. Tom, another five-star right now that we're keeping an eye on. How about Naeem Alford, number 12 player in the country, number 2 cornerback, committed to Ohio State, out of the state of Alabama. But you got some teams coming on, Auburn, Oregon, Florida. What's the latest with his recruitment?
Yeah, he's expected at Florida this weekend, but I'm not really necessarily calling him a heavy hitter, a big player in this recruitment. My 24/7 Sports crystal ball is on the Auburn Tigers, and everybody that I talk to around this recruitment still maintains that Auburn is the most likely flip destination for him if he decides to part ways with Ohio State and not play alongside the number 1 corner of the country, Devin Sanchez. So it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. Again, though, I still feel good about my pick for Auburn. There's a lot of optimism coming out of the Plains right now. Oregon's pushing. Florida's hoping for a home run visit this weekend. We'll see if, keeping Billy Napier in Gainesville for another year is a positive. But again, right now, my best guess would be Auburn.
Tom, another defensive back, one of my personal favorites in the class. I feel like we've talked about this kid on the 105 every show for the past week. Ivan Taylor, our number 2 ranked safety, number 41 overall player, committed to Michigan. I think you got a crystal ball pick in for the Crimson Tide.
I feel great about that pick. There was a moment where Michigan was really doing some nice work behind the scenes and trying to keep him in the fold. But then I got a text the next day saying it's kind of a done deal and they're not feeling very confident in Ann Arbor. So the Crimson Tide, we talked about this for really over a month or two, that they're doing a phenomenal job here and really, really connecting with him. Some of the guys behind the scenes are just really connecting with him and developing a great relationship with him and really treating him like a priority. So I think everything that Alabama stands for, everything they're doing, it seems to be hitting a home. It's a home run for Ivan Taylor, but not only him, but also the parents. I'm told that mom and dad are very, very much on board with a future for him at Alabama. Again, feel great about my crystal ball for the Crimson Tide.
Tom, let's talk about another LSU commit. This one ranked inside the top 50. That's Derek Meadows, the number 7 receiver in the country out of Bishop Gorman High School in Nevada. You think about Meadows, some of the schools that have been attached to him throughout the recruitment, Notre Dame and Michigan, still pushing here. What are the chances that he could flip before signing day?
Myself and Blair Angulo have been all over this one, and I think both of us are a little surprised, but I'm not sure either of us expect him to stick with LSU. I don't want to speak for Blair, but I think we're both on the same page here. LSU doing a really nice job. He's obviously been committed since July. But if I really had a best guess at this point, I think he eventually flips to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. My crystal ball has been in there since day one, really. He was leaning heavily, almost committed to Notre Dame, ended up getting on campus at LSU, fell in love with the program, fell in love with the school, playing in the SEC. But as time moved on, I think there's just something about Notre Dame that kind of caught his eye. He had a great visit over the weekend, this past weekend. So a lot to like if you're a Notre Dame fan. I would keep a very close eye on Derek Meadows. It's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. I do know that he's going to get to LSU for his first game day visit later this month. I believe that's when Oklahoma comes to town, maybe the last weekend of the month. So that's going to be a great opportunity for LSU to kind of keep him in the fold and keep him on campus and get him in. But at this point, my best guess is that Notre Dame gets it done.
Tom, this is one you've been talking about for a while behind the scenes. Julian Lewis, I think you officially fired in the crystal ball pick for him to go and flip to Colorado. Is this a done deal? Is Indiana still out of the mix? Is USC still involved? What's the latest there?
Well, the latest is expected to show up at Georgia this weekend, so that's going to be interesting. So another wrinkle to watch. But to be completely transparent, I love my prediction right now for Colorado. I feel great about it. I mean, people think I've been kind of flip-flopping with my picks on here. I've really only put in one crystal ball pick, and it's for Colorado. So there was moments where Auburn was feeling very, very good about its chances, but they just couldn't come to an agreement, get on the same page, and they couldn't get it done. So they pivoted to Deuce Knight. Georgia was in the mix early on, and then it started looking like Indiana was able to get it done. There's a great opportunity for him to start from day one. Not a guarantee, though, but everything else seemed to work out. But again, they couldn't get him on campus. He was talking about visiting Bloomington multiple times, but it couldn't pull the trigger and get there for a late season game day visit. So that kind of both sides really kind of parted ways at this point. So you got to watch Georgia this weekend. We'll see what happens. They already have Ryan Montgomery in the fold. Again, at this point, I think there's Georgia coaching, the sources, things like that. They feel like there's a shot, but they're not really all that optimistic. So I feel great about Colorado. If he ends up picking the Buffaloes, maybe a signing day flips late in the process, splash that Deion Sanders is known to get. I also think it's the best opportunity for him to step in day one and be the starter and take over for Shedeur Sanders. So great opportunity, feel great. Adam Munster-Taggart does a great job on our Colorado site. He too is on board with the Buffaloes. I expect Colorado to land Julian Lewis.
That time of the year, quarterback dominoes. We'll see what Georgia does. Pretty interesting tidbit there. Tom, Andrew, we appreciate it as always. Guys, just a reminder, you are locked in to the 105. You can catch us every Monday and Wednesday, 2 o'clock Eastern on CBS Sports Network, Wednesday right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, in wherever you find your podcast. For Andrew Ivins, Tom Loy, I'm Cooper Petagna. Have a great rest of your week.